Welcome to the Ricecast. I'm your host, Dan Pigsley. Sitting across from me, as always, is my friend and yours, Pastor Willy Rice. Pastor, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Good to be back. A little cold outside.
I don't like it.
Yeah, you don't like it.
Not a fan.
You know, a lot of people are excited because it's first cold day we've had this season, but it got cold here this week.
It was nuts. Well, me and you got to spend a lot more time together this week than we usually do.
Right? We were over in Orlando.
And it was cold up there. I don't get it. Like, I understand sometimes, like, you're close to the water down here, but I'm in Orlando, man. It's supposed to be hot, sweaty, sticky.
No.
It was miserable. I don't like it. I don't like the cold. 85 plus.
You're a Florida guy.
I am. I'm a Florida guy.
I kind of like it this holiday season. It was all pretty and the sky's clear and sunny, so I can take it. But by January, we're ready for it to beat spring again.
For sure. Well, I'm texting my wife, Sarah, because, she was home with the kids, and I said, I hate the cold. She goes, well, I want the kids to see snow. I said, then take them. I'll sit here. So. But we'll end up seeing snow at some point. They will. I've lived in snow. I've shoveled snow. I'm done with snow.
You're done with snow. Yeah.
But you doing all right?
Doing great. We enjoyed being over at the convention this week, Florida Baptist Convention in Orlando with some of our team. And so great to see a lot of friends there. And we have a great state convention. It's great to see so many good friends and to hang out.
It was great. I'll tell you, the pastors that they brought for the pastors conference and even that spoke at the convention, they were just all fantastic.
Yeah, it was a great time. My friend Eric Stitz at First Baptist Daytona Beach, he was the pastors conference president. And then our friend Michael Orr was our state convention president. They was kind of back-to-back there. And a lot of preaching, a lot of just good fellowship. Saw a lot of great friends as we do. And then my good friend Brian Stowe is the new president of the Florida Baptist Convention. So congratulations to Brian Stowe, pastor of First Baptist Church, Plant City.
Yeah.
And great guy.
Won in a landslide, too.
I think it was, Oh, he was the only one, right?
He was the only one.
Yeah. That
awesome,
was when I ran for state convention president back, it's been early 2000s. That was, fortunately, no one else ran. So it was, it's easy to win a one-man beauty contest sometimes. But no, Brian's a great leader and a lot of unity in our Florida Baptist family. And appreciate Stephen Rummage and his leadership. So all the guys who lead, just appreciated what they put together this week. It was good to be there.
It's great. And then going to Orlando, there's good food everywhere,
Yeah, we had our team, all of our campus pastors and some of our teaching team, so we kind of built a little bit of a retreat around it. So, as you know, did some work kind of planning out the spring and all the way to next summer and talked about a lot of good things. So, but we also had some good time hanging out. So, a lot of fun in Orlando.
Well, Pastor, I want to continue our conversation that we started last week. So obviously, if you don't know, if you're watching, I would encourage you to go back last week. Obviously, Pastor, you have a great season ahead of you as you continue to run for the.
Well, we have a season ahead of us. We have a season ahead of us, but we're looking forward to the opportunity to just see what the Lord does. And again, as we've shared, felt like God had led us to kind of allow our name to be nominated for the president of the Southern Baptist Convention. So it's going to be a couple of months where we won't do this every week, of course, but a couple of months of where, there's going to be a lot of conversations, and hopefully most of them will be good conversations. Sometimes they get a little strained, but hopefully not too much. And we put out, as you know, kind of 7 pillars of a Baptist renewal. That's kind of what we're saying. Hey, let's pray about a Baptist renewal, regardless of how the other things turn out. And I felt like we needed to have, some conversation starters. So we put out 7 pillars, and I think we talked about 2 of those last week, and go talk about a couple more today.
Yep. And one thing, I heard a story, as a third-party story. I want to know if it's true, if you've even heard the story about your grandson telling his friends that you were...
This is a great story. So Judson is, 8 or 9, and a great young man. He's Amanda and Kyle's little boy. And he was trying to explain it to somebody who knew what was going on. Yeah. And he kind of mixed stories. And he said, my Pop-Pop, he calls me Pop-Pops. Pop-Pops is a season ticket holder for the Florida Gators. And so he was explaining this. He said, Pop-Pops has been a season ticket holder for the Gators so long, he's running for president of the SEC.
I love that
and
story.
when I heard that, I go, well, now that's the job I want. That's the job I really do want, president of the SEC.
Yeah.
So I didn't know how to run for that, but if I'll throw my name in the hat on that one. How about that?
Let's get through this season first. And then,
yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah, I heard that story third party. I just thought that was so funny. That's such a sweet story. But yes, you're right. So we started talking about your pillars last week. We talked about convictional clarity. I kept on saying conventional clarity, it's and then denominational accountability. And that's where we ended last week. Well, this week I want to look at your third and maybe your fourth pillar if we get there.
Okay.
But your third pillar is missional integrity. Where did this come from? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, that's a great one, and probably maybe of all of them, maybe the hardest to kind of define, kind of a nebulous concept, but I think an important conversation. And I'll start right out by saying people will go, well, what can the president of the SBC do about that? And I think it's a fair question, but my answer is you can speak. You can shine the light in certain ways. And I just feel like we're at a point in evangelical life where we're talking about some of the models over the last decades. And again, God is working. He's always building his church. But when we look at some of the dominant models in evangelicalism, I think it's left a lot of people behind, and I think it has highlighted some things that are not as spiritually healthy as they need to be. I'm speaking about things we saw in the church growth movement, and then even in the heels of the church growth movement, it came along kind of a reaction to that. I don't know what you call it, the young restless reform kind of movement that kind of ran its course, and yet. Even though those movements were sometimes seen as antithetical, I really think there's a lot of commonality in that, and they overlapped. And we've seen some of the dominant models in Baptist life and in broader evangelical life that have collapsed, that have kind of come up short. And a lot of pastors out there are frustrated, discouraged, because we've held up these models of like a super church, a mega church, a very successful church. And it has left a lot of smaller churches, neighborhood churches, frustrated and discouraged. We have exalted size above substance. Mm-hmm. We've exalted growth above health. We've exalted celebrity pastors above integrity, and we've paid a price for that. And I think we need better models. And again, I know the SBC president can't, poof magic, make that happen. But I think we can begin to talk about some of those things and where some of our models and some of our examples have fallen short. I've done some speaking and trying to do a little bit of writing. Who knows what the Lord will do with it, but putting some things down on paper about some of the failures of the church growth movement. And I'm a child of the church growth movement. But I think one of the failures is we began to equate growth and health in such a way that it led us to some very unhealthy places. And we just assumed that if a church was growing and getting bigger, it meant it had to be evangelistically healthy, doctrinally healthy. And we've seen that kind of run its course long enough to where we've seen, hey, bigger is not always better. Now, who wants their church to be declining? No one. Who wants their church to be growing? Everybody. I get that, of course. But we do need to distinguish between size and growth and success, American style, and real biblical and spiritual health. And I think maybe the SBC president at least could be a voice in that regard. And when I talk about a Baptist renewal, I'm talking about, having healthier, more sustainable, and more biblical models.
Well, how would you define a healthy church?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. First of all, doctrinally sound, doctrinally sound, stable. We certainly all want to grow, but that growth should not be something that is manufactured just through methodology and just through celebrity and just through promotion. I think a healthy church is one that is healthy in a couple of areas. First is doctrine, then in terms of our mission and understanding real evangelism, not just attractional growth models where you're bringing a lot of people in, but sharing the gospel clearly, engaging the culture, absolutely. But the healthy models come from healthy understanding of our mission that is based on real evangelism, real discipleship, real teaching. One of the questions I've been asked, even since we've done this, even we put the pillar statement out there, and some people started responding and asking questions, and we're going to try to answer those. Can't answer them all when they come in, but we're going to try to as we go along. because I think people have a right to ask questions, and, I want to be able to answer as much as I can. But one of the things I heard right out of the gate was, hey, you didn't talk about discipleship in those pillars.
I just read those comments on your tweet, yeah.
And you know what? I thought, you may have a good point, actually. Yeah. Maybe we need an 8th pillar. But I think I would want to put discipleship in this pillar, because what I'm talking about here is the kind of growth that is a real growth, that is solid growth, where it's not just attractional crowds and bigger, attractional methods and bigger crowds, but that we're really teaching and we're really training, and it is sustainable and it is healthy. And we've got models that transfer to small churches, to rural churches. Most of our churches are still smaller churches. Most of our churches. A lot of our churches are in rural places and not in big populated areas, suburban booming areas. And a lot of them have just been left behind because we've so exalted some models that we haven't really given them the tools to succeed. A church can have 80 or 90 people and be a strong church. It can have less than that. You can say, well, it's going to be growing and reaching people. It can, but let me tell you, I've been there where you had 40 people. I've been in a mission church. We had less than that. And honestly, we worked harder maybe in evangelism and sharing our faith and teaching our people to go from 20 to 30 than a lot of churches much, much bigger than that. So I want churches that are, sometimes people call them normative sized churches, or smaller churches, or churches in rural communities, to be able to feel like they're winning, they're succeeding, and we celebrate healthy models and healthy ministry, not just bigger is always better, and we're striving for a success American style. And I'm glad those people are bringing up discipleship, because that really becomes a part of it. Because one of the things I didn't talk about in the pillars that much is Christian education. And as you know, here at Calvary, one of the things God has really blessed is our school. And I really think one of the things Southern Baptists could do in the next chapter, in the years ahead, are really emphasize the importance of Christian education, whether we're resourcing and helping homeschool families, or, again, we're having schools there at our churches. There is so much opportunity, and that opportunity is only going to go greater. So when you're talking about discipling your people, that's one way we need to talk about it. We need to talk about doing a better job of teaching our people in the church. And so I welcome that conversation on discipleship. We need to learn a lot. We need to do a lot better. But when I talk about missional integrity, that's what I'm talking about. Let's not get so enamored with these models that are American-style success stories, bigger, faster, better, newer, all that. Again, growth is wonderful, but let's make sure we're doing it in a very grounded way, in a very doctrinally sound way, in a very biblically based way. Let's not confuse American-style success with true spiritual fruit. Sometimes those are not the same thing.
That's so good. Well, Pastor, one thing I appreciate you. I've known you for about 3 years now. One thing I've learned from you is you are a continual learner. You're always talking about some of your friendships where people are pouring into you, and so. Is there someone or is there a church that you're acquainted with, or people that you're acquainted with right now that you would say, hey, they are the ones, they're kind of leading the charge, doing like missional integrity, someone who's
it would be hard to name one or two, and I don't want to put them in a bullseye here, right, but I think there are so many people who are writing about that and really talking about, I think of a guy who I don't even know well, but J.T. English has written a lot about deeper discipleship in their church, and talking about leaning into the need to really equip people, teach people in doctrinally sound ways. English is one who's been writing and talking. Again, I don't even know him personally, but I've read a couple of his books and some of the things he's saying. But he's, and I don't even know that he's Southern Baptist, actually. But he's one of those who said, hey, our emphasis on groups, that's fine, that's great. We had that whole thing through the church growth era. But groups kind of emphasize connection points, but not as much doctrinal content and teaching. And we almost lowered the value of a teaching gift in our people. When God does equip people in our church, who aren't necessarily pastors, though, to be teachers, they have a teaching gift. And a small group in a house is nice, but sometimes that's not the real place that you use a teaching gift. And we need to have classes that are training people, teaching people. That's why we're trying to do the Calvary Institute here. We're trying to introduce the Calvary College concept here. We want to get serious about the local church being a place where you can equip, teach, and train people. And so I'm sure there's a lot of models out there that, I'm not aware of all of them, but there's certainly some good ones out there.
Well, and you even mentioned, we have so many churches. The majority of our churches in our convention are smaller churches.
Right.
There's so many faithful pastors that are out there just doing the work of ministry. They're just faithful in everything they're doing, and yet they can feel invisible in conversations.
They
like
really
this.
do, and I'm talking to a lot of them, and I don't know it's any one person's fault. I mean, we all kind of embrace this whole church growth, and then it's funny, again, even the Young Restless Reform movement was a reaction to church growth in a way, and yet a lot of the same kind of attractional motivations are still fueling some of the leaders in that movement, and we've seen that. They kind of went about it different, but it was, there was still a lot of attractionalism in there, even though a lot of them claim to be more missional. So I just think by platforming churches that were bigger and successful and fastest growing and the biggest and the greatest and that a lot of pastors out there who are faithfully laboring in some of these unseen places felt overlooked and they felt forgotten. And I don't think that's intentional, but we have got to change that, because some of those guys are faithful heroes and they're making a difference in small places, small towns, small communities, rural areas, or maybe they're revitalizing in a difficult place. And I want to tell you, a church that goes from 50 to 70 in a year, that may be one of the biggest movements, you could talk about. But I'm thinking of a pastor I was hearing from just the other day, went into a church that really needed people weren't sure if it was going to last, and he's had a great revitalizing work in that church. But he also feels like he's kind of been marginalized and overlooked by a lot of things we've been doing in the convention. And it's guys like that I want to be able to pull back in and say, hey, you matter, we value you, and that whole Billy Baptist concept I've talked about, that everybody matters, not just the biggest and the most talented and the most successful guys.
How do you make them feel valuable?
Well, you make people feel valued by valuing them, by letting them know they matter. And I think paying attention and celebrating their stories and treating those victories like they're important also. And not just acting like the big church or the church that gives the most money is the one we're going to pay attention to, but that everybody matters. If we're going to have a real renewal in Baptist life, it isn't just going to be a handful of suburban mega churches getting bigger, just like we've talked about X150. It's got to be more than one big church getting a little bit bigger, or a mega church getting marginally better. We need a lot of churches and a lot of different kinds of churches experiencing renewal and health. And
I don't want to give too much away, but even with that mindset, like, you're looking at this idea, like, we need these churches in these areas because we can only go so far. And so equipping those churches to fulfill the Great Commission is what we're trying to go
I've been saying for a couple of years that I really think the neighborhood church is a huge model in the next few years. That there are a whole lot of people that really don't want that huge crowd. It's one of the reasons we have 6 campuses, and a lot of our churches are neighborhood churches. Your church is a wonderful neighborhood down there in Seminole, and you think of Safety Harbor and Crystal Beach and those areas. East Lake, a little more regional because it's a very busy area, but some of those really are, especially Crystal Beach and Safety Harbor, in this niche neighborhood. And I just, people like Safety Harbor, people have asked, why would you open a campus like 2 miles from the front door of the Clearwater campus? Well, because it's in a unique neighborhood. And I think there are people that will be reached in that context who aren't necessarily going to drive, even if it's 5 minutes, to a larger campus. And so I just think we need to value all expressions of healthy ministry.
I think that's so good. I think, so that's missional integrity, and we'll talk about more of that in months to come and as we continue to unpack as questions keep coming in.
Yep.
Love that you unpacked the discipleship, because I actually did see those comments, and it's a great question. I think
honestly, I thought maybe we need to add 8th pillar.
Yeah.
But I also think when you're talking about missional integrity, we're talking about real biblical evangelism, real biblical discipleship, and sustainable ministry models, not just who's the most talented, who's the hottest, who's the best, that kind of stuff. It's just not proving to be sustainable. Sure. We need healthy models that are sustainable.
All right, so pillar number 4, cultural responsibility. This is gonna be a hot topic one. I feel like
Yeah,
a lot of people are gonna want to talk about this one.
This one we'll play this one out over, I'm sure, a couple of months.
Yeah.
And we've talked about a lot of this on the podcast as we've kind of critiqued the whole third way conversation. God's not on the right and left, all that kind of dynamic, which, as I've said before, I've used language like that also over the last few years. But I think people are now recognizing kind of, okay, maybe we had, we talked about this a lot. Maybe, there was something to say in that vein, but now we're seeing the limits of that type of thinking. And cultural responsibility is simply a way of articulating we cannot be afraid as Southern Baptists to engage the great cultural battles and cultural debates of our time. We cannot be so afraid of somebody labeling us as political that we exalt this value of neutrality in such a way that we end up silencing our voice on the great moral issues of our time, because there are, in fact, some great moral issues in our time that are begging for a Christian response.
Well, and you even identified it. You called it a ruse. I would like you to unpack what you mean by that.
Yeah, maybe it's tough language. A ruse is something, hey, you think you're doing one thing and you're deceived. And I don't know that people intended to deceive us. So, maybe those, I don't want to convey that.
Sure.
Certainly we have a spiritual enemy that's always trying to deceive us. But I think a lot of people said, hey, in order to be missionally effective, again, we've talked about this, so I'm repeating myself. We cannot engage in some of these great cultural debates of our time because people will think it's too political or too partisan. So what I heard right from some people's mouth was, we cannot be cultural warriors. We're supposed to be gospel missionaries. And that sounds like a great, great phrase, except why are you saying it like that? Sometimes when you make a statement, you define the debate by the words you use. And culture war is itself a pejorative term. No one wants to be thought of as being unnecessarily disputatious or, combative. Maybe some people do, but most people don't. They want to get along with folks. So it sounded good. Let's not be culture warriors. Let's be gospel missionaries. But again, one of the things in the Charlie Kirk moment, and it's been now 2 months, and people are still kind of processing all that happened. But as we discussed in the wake of the Charlie Kirk assassination, one of the things that Kirk kind of dispelled was this idea that you have to make a choice to engage in great cultural debates, or you can be a gospel witness. You can't do both. Because what we saw in the fallout of the Charlie Kirk assassination was the incredible gospel impact that he had. And we've continued to see it here, as has many churches. We have had people coming here. I think you've talked about this at your campus. We baptized a man here recently. It's like we're seeing this. A lot of people going. In fact, I heard a story from my son's church this week in South Florida that was mentioned at the convention. Jimmy Scroggins told the story about from Stevens campus in Jensen Beach, and one of their campuses. And it was about a man who, in the wake of that, basically realized, hey, I've got to pay attention to spiritual things. Yeah. I've got to make a decision for Christ and quit playing around with this. And so, again, one of the things that Kirk proved was you can engage the cultural debates and be a gospel missionary. His life had a tremendous gospel impact.
How do we as churches, as local churches, because it feels like because of third ways and we've kind of lost that prophetic voice, how do we re-engage it? How do we get that back without seeming like we are political bipartisan?
Yep. And what we want to avoid here is partisanship.
Yeah.
That we are just the handmaidens of some political movement or political party. That is not what I'm advocating, that, let's become an arm of the Republican Party. I'm not advocating that at all. So it's not partisanship. As I think it's Josh Howardin who said, it isn't that religion is becoming more political. It's that politics got more religious. Politics got in our lane. And when they got over to defining what is and isn't a human life and what is and isn't gender and what is and isn't marriage, okay, you're way out of your lane. Yeah. Now you are making theological statements. And theology, we realize now, impacts all of life. Those are worldviews being applied in the political realm, but they are theological. They are inherently theological. Unfortunately, those in society, those have been destructive theological ideas. So, no, we don't want to be partisan. And I think one of the ways you avoid that is by acknowledging the very real threat of that. No, we don't want to do that. We want to be free to speak to either party. We want to be free to call it on the right or on the left, people out when they need to be called out. We want to keep that kind of independence, that kind of strength. That's how we avoid that. We talked about this when we talked about these dangers of third wayism. We don't want to become so enamored with a single politician or a single political party that we turn a blind eye when there are things that need to be challenged. But I think we've been so afraid of being labeled as partisan or being labeled as political that a lot of churches, our voice grew silent when it shouldn't. And, people are warning us out there now about the ditches on both sides of the road. That's what, people are saying. Well, there's a ditch on both sides of the road. Well, that's true. There are ditches on both sides of the road. But it's a little disingenuous to talk about the ditches on both sides of the road when you're about to careen into the Grand Canyon. When you're about to drive into the Grand Canyon, if you're standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon, you go, you know what, we need to be worried about the ditches on both sides of the road. You're going, yeah, we do, but you're about to fall off the Grand Canyon here. So maybe you ought to pay attention to that chasm. And it's just simply not an accurate statement to say that right or left, as we think of them culturally and politically, are equally in error when it comes to theology and worldviews. They're just not. And in our culture, we are careening in a direction that is very destructive, very dangerous. And it isn't about being on the right or the left. It is about articulating the truth of God. And it is consistent with a gospel evangelistic mission. Because, as you know, sometimes it's the truth. The truth always goes with grace. It's not sometimes. Truth and grace go together. But God uses the truth, i.e., God uses the law, sometimes to prepare us for the need for grace. People must be told the truth about their sinfulness and their need for repentance in order to understand the need for grace. We can't be afraid of that confrontational, prophetic voice. The idea that we're going to soften our voice, get them into church, introduce them to Jesus, and then 6 months later go, oh, by the way, let me tell you what it means to follow Jesus. Okay, obviously discipleship is a process. Obviously there's things they're going to learn down the road. But look, if there are things that need to be talked about on the front end, we're not doing them anyone any favor by ignoring those conversations just because they're difficult. So when I talk about cultural responsibility, I'm talking about Southern Baptists kind of reclaiming our cultural voice. We have... because of a number of things, we've talked about the ERLC and the trajectory there over the last 10 years, we kind of checked out of that. And I think some of our most dominant voices were telling us, avoid the ditches on both sides of the road, kind of stay in the middle. Well, there are ditches on both sides of the road. I'll tell you what's in the middle of the road. A yellow line and dead skunks. That's what's in the middle of the road. So the middle of the road is not necessarily the truth either, okay? We need to avoid unnecessary extremes on both sides, but just hanging out in the middle, that's not where we need to be. We need to be in God's Word, founded on God's truth, and articulating God's truth to a culture that desperately needs to hear it.
And I completely agree with you, but I put my mind into that, that young pastor who has a small church, and they're just terrified of, like, if I step out in this truth, like, I'm going to lose, I'm going to lose my credibility, or that's how their mind's going to go. And what would you say to those young pastors who are struggling? Like, how do I maintain this convictional truth that I have, but bring my people along with me?
The job of pastoring is hard, and because you have to be willing to lose people. And when you tell the truth, it
hurts.
It sometimes it hurts, and it hurts when people go. You cannot be so afraid of, if I say this, somebody's going to go, because now they're kind of holding you hostage. And you're keeping the truth from somebody else. Because let me tell you what else is out there. There's somebody waiting to come, or somebody waiting to be convicted, because you have the courage to speak the truth. And right now, we've talked about this also. There is a huge mission field out there, and they are looking at our churches saying, now, have you guys caved to? Like, have you guys gone woke to? Like, are you out there just caved in, or are you guys articulating the truth? So I'm not talking about waving a partisan flag just so we get a bunch of attaboys, but I'm not talking about that at all. But I'm talking about articulating gospel truth, biblical conviction, prophetic truth in such a way that helps people understand the truth and helps people, the Holy Spirit will use that to cause people to fall under conviction and to realize their need for Christ.
I don't even know the word.
I think you got more to lose than, or more to gain than you have to lose. And what I would just say to the young pastors, hey, let's lean into some of these hard issues. We can do it with humility. We can do it with grace, but let's lean into them, because I think there's more on the upside than you need to fear. Yeah, you're going to get criticized, and yes, somebody may leave. Somebody else may come. And if you stand on the truth, you get to define who comes and who leaves.
That's so good. And I think my question for this, because again, we're just kind of putting these pillars out here because these are the pillars you're really setting up for your as you run for the Southern Baptist Convention president. Within this pillar, in the position of president of the Southern Baptist Convention, like, what can you do in here to kind of help the local church just be strengthened in this area?
Well, I hope we can get some good voices in our convention, and instead of kind of apologizing for Southern Baptists and kind of being ashamed of Southern Baptists and kind of scolding them for some of the convictions they do hold, we can actually encourage them, resource them, and speak for them. And I felt like one of the problems in the last couple of years, and I've talked about this, is that we've had some people in the public square who felt like their view was maybe to speak to Southern Baptists on behalf of the public square instead of speaking to the public square on behalf of Southern Baptists. So hopefully we can get some good leaders in place who aren't ashamed of our people, who share the convictions and values of our people, and will help resource our people to speak to those issues. I think that's one of the things we can do, is help those pastors. And again, we've done some of that. We've done some of that.
Sure.
I don't want to act like we haven't done that. We've done some of that, but I think we can do it more. And as leaders, listen, let's speak out when we need to speak out. Let's not be so afraid of political ramifications and being labeled this by somebody that's, we're worried about what they think about us. Let's worry about what God thinks about us, and let's speak His truth and trust God with the results.
So good. Well, Pastor, I want to put a pause on just these pillars right now, just kind of turn our attention. Calvary's been a really cool month this month with Missions Month. We have we're focusing on foster care and adoption this weekend, which is going to be an amazing time. We've got different things happening at each campus where, we're interviewing some of the families that have really jumped into our X150 vision and fostered and adopted kids in our local community. And it's really cool to see just what we're seeing the Lord do through our church, through X150, and just wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to that.
Well, I appreciate that, Dan. It has been fun. November is kind of Missions Month. We did a podcast on that a couple of weeks ago, and for us, it is. We really highlight it and run up, and this week is that value. When we did X150, our goal was to have a multiplying impact, and we thought we could do that by starting churches, by sending out champions, next generation leaders, and by serving children. And our goal was to serve 150 children through foster care or adoption. We've gone over that number now. And so it's a big value here, and it's lived out, I think, on every one of our campuses. I think every one of our campuses has embraced this value. We've got so many families that are involved in foster care, the foster care work, which is hard work, by the way, very hard work, and also adopted children. Someday I'd love to see every foster child, adopted child up there on the stage singing in a choir. Wouldn't that be incredible? I don't know how you'd put that together. Wouldn't that be beautiful?
Laney can take care of that.
Maybe give her a week or so. But I'm just so grateful to anyone listening here who have been involved in that ministry, who have served, who have opened your home. We want to continue to do that. We're leaning in a huge way, and we're going to keep doing that even when X150 is over. So it'll be a great week to highlight that, tell some of those stories, and it just is an emphasis I'm so gratified on.
It's awesome. I love it. Love being part of this church. Love seeing what the Lord's doing. Pastor, appreciate your time. I know it's been a crazy week. We literally just got back from Orlando a couple hours ago. I text you, like, you want to do the podcast? You're like, Sure.
Let's go. Absolutely.
Let's keep moving. Yeah, I love that. Well, so appreciate your time praying for you this week. If you're watching the podcast, thank you for watching. Excited to see what the Lord continues to do in your life. If you need anything, please feel free to reach out. Pastor, any last words? Well,
appreciate everybody listening, and look forward to seeing everybody Thanksgiving now. Listen, maybe 2 weeks away here.
Best holiday on the calendar,
and
Pastor.
We're looking forward to the holiday season and everything that happens here at Calvary. So I'm sure we'll get to talk before then, but I hope everybody has a great holiday season this Thanksgiving season, and really looking forward to, and we may have a chance to do this next week, but I really love the Thanksgiving service, the communion service on Sunday night. Mm-hmm. We do a big Thanksgiving communion service, and it's all the campuses coming together. The music team's all coming together, and it's one of my favorite services of the year. To me, it's what marks the beginning of the holiday season, really. And everything happening now is just kind of introduction, but that's the official beginning. And man, it's going to be great. So I hope everybody enjoys that.
Yep.
And we'll have a great weekend here at Calvary.
And we'll have information about that service right under the show notes right here, so you can see the date and time and make sure you know everything.
By the way, also, can I jump in? Congratulations to our volleyball team, state champions. I think we talked about that maybe last week. That was live on the air.
It was.
And then, or sort of live. And then the band also won a state championship over the weekend. So we got so many state championships around here. Trophies are falling all over the place.
Yeah, we're going to do a podcast just on the state championship.
Yeah, I know. We'll get a table full of trophies. But congratulations to all our students for doing a great job.
So incredible. All right, we love you. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week here on the Ricecast.